It was about 10 years ago, back when I was 15. My sister, Amy, was 17, and we were in the middle of a long, exhausting cross-country trip with our mom and grandparents. We were helping move my grandparents closer to relatives on the East Coast, and by the third day, the endless stretches of highway had dulled us into a kind of quiet misery. Late that evening, somewhere in the Midwest, our mom pulled off into a small town that looked like it had been forgotten by time. The gas stations had old pumps with faded paint, the diner's sign buzzed like it hadn't been fixed in years, and the motel we checked into the Starlight in looked like something out of a postcard from the 1970s. It was a 2-story L-shaped building with a flickering neon sign. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, weeds pushing up through the asphalt. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of cigarettes that had been smoked there decades ago, buried under layers of disinfectant. My grandparents got a room on the first floor, close to the office. My mom, Amy, and I were given a second-floor room at the far end of the building. The hallway leading to our room was dim, lit by yellowed bulbs that made everything look washed out and sickly. We were tired and cranky, but once we hauled the luggage upstairs, my mom just wanted to collapse. She noticed the plastic ice bucket was empty and asked if Amy and I could fill it. Amy grabbed it with a sigh, and I followed her out into the stale-smelling corridor. According to the little map taped behind our door, the ice machine was on the first floor, tucked into a far corner of the building. The walk to the stairwell felt strangely long. Our footsteps were muffled by threadbare carpet, patterned with geometric designs that probably hadn't been updated since the place was built. About halfway down the hall, a man stepped out of one of the rooms. He looked mid-30s, with greasy dark hair and a plain grey shirt that clung to him uncomfortably. He fiddled with his key at the door, as if he were unlocking it, but when it clicked open, he didn't go in. He just stopped and watched us pass. His eyes were dull, flat, and expressionless, following us until we pushed through the stairwell door. The stairwell was concrete, echoing with each of our steps. As the heavy door swung shut behind us, I heard it click open again almost immediately. I glanced back through the wire mesh window and saw the man stepping in after us. He hadn't gone into his room at all. He had waited. He was following. A chill spread through me. Amy must have felt it too, because she quickened her pace without me saying a word. We hurried down the stairs and into the first-floor hallway, identical to the one above. A faded sign pointed to the ice machine at the far end, what felt like an impossible distance away. The bucket swung in Amy's hand as we walked quickly, trying to look normal. But behind us, steady footsteps matched our pace, not rushing, just following. The ice machine was tucked into a small alcove next to a vending machine. It was old and loud, and when Amy pressed the button, ice exploded out with a deafening crash. For a few moments, the clatter drowned everything else out. My pulse raced as I glanced over my shoulder. The hallway was empty. But when the machine groaned to a stop and silence returned, Amy's eyes suddenly went wide. She whispered, "Go." I followed her gaze. 50 feet away, at the far end of the hallway, the man was standing perfectly still, watching us. As soon as we locked eyes, he began walking again, faster now, his footsteps deliberate. Panic surged through me. I remembered the map. There was another stairwell beside the ice machine. Amy and I didn't even need to speak. We bolted through the door, the ice bucket sloshing, and scrambled up the steps two at a time. Our lungs burned as we sprinted back down the hallway toward our room. Amy fumbled with the keycard, cursing under her breath, until finally it beeped green. We stumbled inside, slammed the door, unlocked every lock, the deadbolt, the chain, the swing bar. Leaning against the door, our hearts pounding, we listened. The hallway was silent. No footsteps, nothing. We tried to explain it to our mom, but she brushed it off, saying we probably scared ourselves over nothing. Even our grandmother, when we told her later, waved her hand and suggested maybe the man thought we were noisy teenagers about to cause trouble. Their dismissal made me doubt myself, but deep down I knew what I'd seen. That night, hours later, I woke to a sound, a heavy thud against our door. Not a knock, more like a shoulder or a fist hitting it with slow, deliberate force. My eyes snapped open in the dark. Amy was already sitting upright, her face pale. My mum clapped a hand over her mouth, stifling a cry. The pounding came again, slow, relentless. He knew which room we were in. Shaking, my mum dialed the front desk on the motel phone. No one answered. She grabbed her cell and whispered to 911, explaining that someone was trying to break in. As she spoke, the pounding suddenly stopped. Silence pressed against the room. That silence was worse than the noise. Minutes later, firm knocks rattled the door and the voice called out, "Police!" My mum peered through the peephole before unlocking the door. 2 officers stood outside. One stayed with us while the other searched the building. He returned shaking his head. Nobody out there, but when they checked the security cameras, the truth came out. The man had followed us to the ice machine, chased us to the stairwell, and later stood outside our door pounding on it. Then he slipped out through the emergency exit. The police never found him. We left at first light, all of us exhausted, shaken, and eager to escape. But to this day, I can still picture those empty, flat eyes watching us in that dim hallway, waiting until we were alone. And every time I see a motel sign glowing in the night, I wonder how many other doors he stood outside, just waiting for someone to unlock them. It was late, long past midnight, when the storm hit. Sheets of rain blurred the highway, and the wipers could barely keep up. My buddy and I had been driving 4 hours, desperate to get home after visiting friends a few states away. The GPS showed nothing for miles, except for a tiny dot off the road, a place called the Mountain Crest Motel. With the rain worsening and the clock edging toward 2 in the morning, we had no choice but to stop. The motel looked like it had been forgotten by time. A low, sprawling building with faded green paint, its neon sign buzzed and flickered in the downpour. The parking lot was nearly empty, cracked with weeds sprouting through the asphalt, and a single yellow light above the office door cast long, unsettling shadows. We grabbed our bags, sprinted through the rain, and pushed inside. The lobby was tiny and smelled faintly of mildew, like the carpet had been damp 4 years. Behind the counter sat a man who looked half asleep, his thinning hair slicked back, his eyes heavy, but strangely sharp. They landed on us. He smiled without warmth, slid the register forward, and asked for a name. His voice was gravelly, to low, and the way he watched us made me feel like we'd interrupted something. "We'll take 1 room," I said quickly, handing over cash. The clerk counted the bills slowly, his fingers lingering, then slid a tarnished brass key across the counter. "Room 6, he said, before muttering something under his breath I couldn't catch. I forced a polite smile, and we left, eager to get out of that musty lobby. Room 6 was at the far end of the building. The corridor smelled worse, like damp wood, and cigarette smoke baked into the walls. Inside, the room was small and plain, with a pair of twin beds, a buzzing ceiling light, and curtains that didn't quite cover the window. The air was heavy, and when I sat on the bed, dust puffed up like the mattress hadn't been used in years. We were too tired to care. My buddy collapsed onto his bed fully clothed, and within minutes, the sound of the storm blended with his steady breathing. I lay awake longer, uneasy. The rain pounded against the window, and once or twice, I thought I heard footsteps outside, crunching slowly across the gravel lot. But every time I pulled back the curtain, the lot was empty, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the single lamp. Finally, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. I don't know how much time passed before I woke again. The storm had faded, and the silence was absolute until I heard it. A faint scratching sound. My eyes shot to the door. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate, like fingernails dragging against wood. My chest tightened as the sound stopped abruptly. That's when I saw the shadow, a long, thin silhouette stretched across the bottom of the curtain. Whoever it was, They were standing right outside our window, perfectly still. My heart pounded. I reached over, shaking my buddy awake, whispering harshly, "Someone's out there." He grudgingly sat up just as the shadow moved, slowly, deliberately, toward the door. The knob rattled once, then again, harder. The old brass lock shook violently, the chain clinking against the frame. My buddy lunged for his bag, fumbling for the baseball bat he always carried in his trunk. I grabbed the phone on the nightstand and dialed the front desk. The line rang and rang, but no one picked up. Then, as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped, the silence pressed in again. My buddy and I froze, listening, holding our breath. A minute passed, then two. Finally, we worked up the courage to peek outside. The lot was empty. No shadows, no footsteps, no one lingering near the window. Shaken, we sat back down, deciding we'd leave at dawn. But before I could close my eyes, something caught my attention. On the inside of the door, just above the handle, were deep, fresh scratches. Not like they'd been there 4 years, like someone had clawed at it only minutes ago. Desperate to get in, when morning came, we returned the key to the clerk. He didn't look tired anymore. He didn't even look surprised. He just gave a strange, knowing smile and said, "Hope you slept well in room 6. We didn't answer. We just got in the car and drove, leaving the Mountain Crest Motel shrinking in the rearview mirror. The scratches burned into my memory. And I still wonder, late at night, how many others checked into that room and never checked out. The Red Pines Lodge sat just off an old highway, tucked into a cluster of tall, spindly trees that seemed to lean toward the building, if trying to smother it. Its sign, once bright red and gold, was chipped and faded, the word lodge barely readable under layers of peeling paint. For decades, it had been the only stop for travelers between two distant towns, and everyone in the area knew its reputation. Cheap rooms, curtains that never quite closed, and secrets whispered about the kind of people who checked in but rarely seemed to check out. I stopped there once, years ago, after a long day's drive left me too exhausted to continue. The parking lot was almost empty, save for 2 cars that looked abandoned, coated in dust as if they hadn't moved in weeks. Inside, the lobby was stale, with a sickly sweet odor of old air freshener barely masking mildew. The clerk, a gaunt man with watery eyes, slid a key across the counter without a word. His silence was heavier than the storm clouds gathering outside. My room was on the 2nd floor. The hallway leading to it was dim and smelled faintly of damp wood, the kind that warps over time. When I opened the door, I noticed the curtains were already drawn, nailed tight to the wall at the edges, as if someone didn't want them opened. The air was thick and heavy, carrying a faint coppery scent that made me think of rust or something worse. I lay down, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid, but sleep didn't come. The silence was too deep, broken only by the occasional groan of the old pipes. Sometime after midnight, I heard it, faint tapping from the wall behind my bed. At first, it was irregular, like wood settling, but soon it became steady. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, over and over again. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to listen. The sound wasn't coming from the pipes, it was deliberate, human. Gathering my nerve, I pressed my ear to the wall. That's when I heard it. A voice, muffled but unmistakable. A woman's voice. "Help me," she whispered, her words barely audible. "Please, help me." My blood ran cold. I stumbled back from the wall, unsure if exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But then the voice came again, more desperate this time. "Don't let them take me." Her sobs were choked, strangled, like she was too weak to cry properly. I grabbed my phone and tried to call the front desk, but the line was dead. The cell service was gone to just an empty signal bar mocking me. Panic welled up inside, but so did anger. Someone was in that wall. Someone was being kept there. I ran into the hall, pounding on the door next to mine. No answer. I pounded harder. Still nothing but silence. Finally, footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. The clerk appeared, his face pale in the flickering light. I pointed at the wall, shouting, "There's someone in there, a woman, she's begging for help." He froze, then shook his head slowly, a faint smile twitching at his lips. "Rooms are empty on this side," he muttered. His tone was flat, rehearsed. He turned and walked away, his steps measured and calm, leaving me trembling in the hallway. I couldn't stay another minute. I grabbed my bag and ran down the stairs, my shoes slapping against the warped wood. The front doors creaked as I pushed into the night air, heart hammering. I didn't stop until I was in my car, tearing down the highway, the Red Pines Lodge shrinking in the rearview mirror. The next day, I returned with the police, but when they searched, the room I'd stayed in looked perfectly normal. No nails in the curtains, no smell of rust, no muffled cries through the walls. The clerk insisted I'd never checked in, that no record of my name existed. Weeks later, though, I found a local newspaper article online. A young woman had gone missing in that very area, last seen checking into the Red Pines Lodge. Her case was never solved. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I swear I still hear those faint taps, 3 at a time, followed by her broken whisper, "Help me."